you all here and excited to bring you resources and initiatives that you may use to support your educational designs as you draft your charter school proposals. And now for some introductions. Today, we have with us our director, Marion Shuddy. Marion, would you like to give a welcome?
Thanks, Duran. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. Seeing some familiar names through our process now. We're really excited to bring you our second support seminar in our series. Looking forward to sharing some great information and hopefully answering some questions.
Thank you. We also have members of the New Schools team, John Garland and Natalie Elliott. Would each of you like to say a few words?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's good to see you all virtually again. This will be actually my first support seminar. I was out last week, so I'm really excited to be with you all today.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to see we have some good attendance here today and some familiar names, as we have mentioned. We're excited about the information today.
Thank you. And finally, we also have with us now Lizette Ridgway. Lizette, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the agency?
Great, sure, Duran. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. My name is Lizette Ridgway. I'm the Director of District Systems and Strategies. Previously served as the Director of School Improvement and now oversee school improvement as well as Texas Tutoring Support, which also is kind of the main division that is releasing guidance and providing support to the field around accelerated instruction and the requirements of House Bill 4545. So excited to share that information with you all later in the presentation.
Thank you, Lizette. So glad to have you with us today. We will also have Brian Doran here in a little while to bring us another presentation. And so before we get started, let's do a little housekeeping. If you have any questions, please place them in the Q&A function for archival purposes. We will try to address them during the Q&A periods, and we'll post all of them, addressed and not, in the FAQ document on the information sessions webpage. And secondly, we are recording today's session and we will post it on the Additional Supports webpage along with the presentations from today. So now let's get started. John, would you like to bring up Marion's deck? And Marion, you're on.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Duran. We are going to talk a little bit today about some other agency supports and initiatives that we have here at TEA. Just want to make sure that everyone knows what's available to them as you all are creating your applications. So let's go ahead and kind of dive right in. I'm just going to walk through a couple of things that we've already talked about in mandatory info sessions, some we haven't. Just want to make sure that you're aware of them, know where to find them on our websites across the agency. And you know, as you're planning and writing your applications, these give some good kind of framework and reference materials to draw from. So I think first and foremost, and you love it, you know it, you've seen it embedded in our application at this point, the Effective Schools Framework. So the Effective Schools Framework is linked throughout the application in our resources page. It provides a framework of district commitments and essential actions, and really shows, you know, these are the components that we find in strong and effective schools and what we want to see in your application as well. So it highlights research-based best practices. I've included the link there, and on the website, you can really dive in and walk through all of those district commitments and kind of essential actions of what we see strong LEAs do in making sure that they have effective schools. And so the Effective Schools Framework, as you can see kind of there at the left, really at the center and the core is effective instruction with strategic staffing, high quality instructional materials and assessments, and a positive school culture, and kind of wrapping around that. And then really at the helm, kind of encompassing all of that is strong school leadership and planning. So we really want to make sure that you're taking a look at that as you're writing your applications, thinking through how you're going to have all of these components in your schools, and want to just draw your attention to that. The next thing that I want to draw your attention to is an optional program that we have here at the agency called the Math Innovation Zones, which supports high quality blended learning for K-8 programs. It has this kind of design and launch process, focuses on the fidelity of implementation of high quality blended learning. And it's part of the Blended Learning Grant Program. And when you get these materials, if you click over it, that Blended Learning Grant Program links to the HB 3 and 30 video about the Blended Learning Grant. You can apply for this after your charter is awarded, but really wanted to kind of connect you guys, take a look if you're interested in having blended learning and math supports be a part of your application and your school design, to take advantage and take a look at what we're offering here at the agency. Math Innovation Zones was kind of expanded into the Blended Learning Grant Program. Now options to get resources and supports to offer blended learning on the ELA side as well as the math side as well. So take a look at that, take a visit to watch that video and just kind of see what else we have to offer at the agency. So the next kind of section applies to folks who are going to have either a high school component or who might, grow a school and eventually expand from maybe like a K-5 to a K-8 to a K-12, or want to add high schools later on. And so wanted to make sure that everyone is getting kind of a flag for this very early on in your school design and process. So here at TEA, we have the Texas College and Career Readiness School models, and they really blend high school and college coursework to help students have technical skills, earn college credentials and degrees even prior to graduating from high school, and also pursue in-demand career paths as well. So we're going to walk through a couple of what we have of those models here at the agency and all the supports that we offer for that. So there are 3 college and career readiness school models that the agency supports: early college, high school, P-TECH, and T-STEM. So early college high school is where students earn a high school diploma, an associate's degree, or up to 60 college credit hours as part of their high school. And so you can, as you're designing your application and thinking through about what you might want to offer in the future, or if you're designing and adding a high school right away, make sure you take a look at each of these opportunities around and kind of thinking through about what you might want to offer at those levels. The second is a P-TECH high school. And the P-TECH is really designed around a pathway from high school to post-secondary education to employment. And so it's a model design started in New York City and really tries to ground students in kind of what do they need to take in order to be able to kind of graduate, have really high quality experiences and be ready to go into the workforce. So we take a look at those P-TECH kind of programming and models. Each one of these school models has its own page on our website that kind of walks through all of the details. And then T-STEM is really around the improved instruction and academic performance in science and math. And so we often see lots of charter applications come through that have a focus on STEM or STEAM. And here we have additional resources and supports for those components as well. So for the college and career readiness school models, the agency offers a number of grants and supports in order to support LEAs to offer these programs. And you'll see here from this kind of planning application, the planning year and the designations that the agency offers, this takes a significant amount of time. So for charter schools that are planning to add these programs maybe later or maybe at a high school campus, this planning starts early. And so I wanted to make sure that we're flagging this for you all in this moment. And then the information and blueprints for each of these models are available on the TEA website as well. So I've included that link here. And the blueprints really walk through in very specific detail what are all of the components of these schools. So they're a really good resource to visit if you're looking at adding high school into your charter application now, or if you want to potentially address that as a future opportunity for growth later as well too. So our next friend is our high quality instructional materials. So we had Leslie present at the mandatory info session, but I just wanted to highlight these again, kind of as an opportunity for you to review. So, you know, as we kind of introed, and you see our friend from our graphic from the Effective Schools Framework back in action here. Go ahead and click through, John. So high quality instructional materials and assessments are one of the key components in the Effective Schools Framework. And so we have done so much over the past 18 months to make materials offered and to help districts and LEAs and new charter leaders identify what is the right high quality instructional materials for your school model and your school design. So just want to kind of, I pulled these from the slides that Leslie shared, but right now, these are the Texas Home Learning instructional materials that are released to date that are all available for use or will be coming soon for use. And so take a look at these. As we said at the info session, these are not required, right? These are, we don't want to be limiting innovation in charter schools. So if you have your own curriculum, if you have your own components that you want to add, that's perfectly acceptable. But we just want to make sure that as you're going through this process, that you have the ability to take a look at all of these and evaluate them and make choices as you're designing your school model. So we're just trying to make sure that everybody knows about them and knows what opportunities exist. So you have a variety of both subject here and well as grade level of what's available for use in schools. And so if you wanted to take advantage and use these, you were more than welcome to as well. And then wanted to also highlight what Leslie also talked about at the info session, which is the resource review. So the purpose of the resource review is to assist LEAs and charter leaders in selecting high quality instructional materials. And so the resource review provides kind of like that comprehensive and user-friendly information about existing instructional materials that are out there. So anything that is reviewed in the resource review has gone through kind of this review process by teams of Texas educators that are trained on the Texas specific quality rubric. And it's a great way for you to be able to say, oh, we chose this, this set of high quality instructional materials because it had this rating on the Texas resource review, or we've chosen this set of high quality instructional materials and we plan on supplementing it with X, Y, and Z because of its rating on the resource review. Just want to make sure that we're highlighting kind of what we have free and open as part of Texas Home Learning. And then the resource review, which is really just reviews of high quality instructional materials that are out there and really to help you decide what you might want to use as you're building your school design and models. So the resource review has rubrics. And so the rubrics show all the criteria that reviewers are considering when they're reviewing products. You can actually use these rubrics and use them for your own process. So let's say you have a resource that you're looking for and some curriculum that you're looking for and you want to assess it. You can use the rubrics in your school design process as well. And then the resource review reports are the reports that provide the finding evidence about those existing instructional materials. So you can review and compare them for different materials that you might be interested in procuring and help you make, a decision. Let's say maybe you're trying to make a decision between 3 different sets of math instructional materials. So I've included the link to the website there below and kind of poke around on there, take a look at what's available, and we're continuing to review more items and add them to the resource review in the meantime as well too. Wanted to give the opportunity to do some Q&A related to any of the things that we talked about.
Thank you, Marion. There is a question regarding the HQIM table in the application. Do all electives need to have a curriculum included? Sorry. John or Marion, would you like to answer that? I think this is pertaining specifically to the application.
Right. Let me pull the application up. I had it just 1 second.
Thanks, John. So as he's pulling that up, so this is one of the great things about the support sessions. We can pull this stuff up, show you where you would put this, kind of answer it in live time.
While he does that, we have another question regarding the recordings from the required info sessions, when they would be posted. Those recordings are posted, as are the presentations from the info session and a couple of additional presentations. Thank you, John, for pulling that up.
Yep. And Drew, can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question is, for the HQIM table in the application, do all electives need to have a curriculum included?
I don't think so. Hold on 1 second. Let me, my screen is a little more complicated than yours. There we go. Just per the directions, you'll include core content areas and any enrichment courses to be offered in these boxes. But there is a, hold on 1 second. Drew, did you want to add anything to that? Sorry, hold on.
So I'll add here,
yeah.
You know, we're asking for those grade levels that are going to be served in year one. What are those courses that you're going to be having, and what are the instructional materials that you're going to use for those courses? I think ultimately your application will be the strongest if you've thought through and identified what you're going to use. And, you know, we want to be able to make a judgment on the most robust and the fullest application as possible. So I think it is definitely worth you doing the due diligence and the time to identify those instructional materials for the curricular resources that you're going to offer and serve in year one.
Thank you. We have another question regarding the resources. The statement is that many of the resources reviewed require registration and a school name. Any suggestions as to how to access free content for review?
That is a really good question. We will look into that and see if there is what we can do to kind of mitigate that so that you're able to review and potentially select. So I think we have, this comes down to licensing. And so we have procured a lot of these things for Texas school, districts and LEAs, including charter schools, but you guys are not that yet. So how can you review and assess that? So we'll look into this and we'll provide some additional information.
Thank you. Follow-up, I have attempted multiple sites. Some allow you to register as a Texas parent and others do not. That's just a little follow-up to that question.
Thanks, Rosalinda. I think that's a really good flag for us, and we'll reach out to Leslie and see what we can do on the HQIM team as well. So.
All right. There are no more questions at this moment. Thank you, Marion, so much. Now we're going to move into the presentation by Lizette. Lizette, would you come on camera, please? Thank you. And great. As John pulls it up.
I'm sorry, Lizette was going to drive her own. I'm so sorry, Lizette.
It's okay. Yeah, I'll share my screen.
There we go.
All right. John, I can see you. Can y'all see me okay? And the slides okay? Great.
Yep.
All right. So we are going to talk about House Bill 4545 quickly. I wanted to use this opportunity as you all are planning and having conversations in preparation for kind of a new school and kind of starting to think through what instruction would look like and what are the requirements. House Bill 4545 passed during this last regular legislative session. It was signed into law in June. And it has been something that the agency has really tried to get a lot of supports out, and has really kind of created a division, which is our Texas Tutoring Supports division, to not only really help districts have access to supplemental materials that meet the requirement of House Bill 4545, but also kind of to help districts take it a step further and really get into more of the research-based high impact tutoring. So let's first kind of take, these slides are posted until I'll have access, and you're able to contact me if you have questions later on. But during our time together, I want to quickly touch on what are the requirements that need to be in place for students that need accelerated learning committees. What requirements are surrounding accelerated supplemental instruction, and then where can you find more resources and really leverage some of those tutoring supports that are out there. So the biggest key change with House Bill 4545 is it removed a lot of the language around retention and retesting. So what was previously in statute is that students that were in grades 5 or in grades 8 that were not successful on their state assessment were required to be retained at the same grade level. There was an opportunity for a grade placement committee to convene and to then kind of review the student and the circumstances in the assessment and make the decision to go ahead and promote the student. But that has now been removed from the statutory language. So grade placement committees are no longer in statute, and the retention requirement for those students in 5th and 8th grade who were not successful is no longer there. In regards to retesting, there is now only one opportunity for a student to take a math or a reading assessment. And so those, what had previously been there as there was 2 different retesting or retake opportunities for students are no longer there. So I think the biggest change and the biggest takeaway that we have kind of been stressing is this removes a lot of the high stakes testing requirements that were previously associated with STAR. So if a student does not pass or does not meet the threshold for kind of satisfactory performance on a state assessment, they no longer will be retained. What House Bill 4545 does now is if a student is not successful, it essentially tags that student so that the district then can provide them additional support in the following school year. So it really removes a lot of those punitive measures that were there previously. One of the key components of House Bill 4545 and one of the requirements that is in there is that accelerated learning committees need to convene for students that are in 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade and who are not successful in math and reading STAR. Based on the placement of kind of where this is located in statute, we're actually going to be having a conversation with our legal team to see if there is any flexibilities around accelerated learning committees for charter schools in the future. And so there is a portion of House Bill 4545 that talks about ensuring that accelerated instruction is provided by a certified teacher. That part of statute does not apply or is not applicable to charter schools. And so we are continuing to have conversations around whether this component of accelerated learning committees does. And I think we'll continue to release guidance on that, here in the next month or so. But I think it is important for y'all to have a general understanding of what is the accelerated learning committee. So, I talked about who needs an accelerated learning committee. That's not all students who took a state assessment. It's limited to 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. It is limited to only the subject areas of math and reading. The purpose of that is so that the committee can convene and determine what is the best educational plan to get this student to be successful in grade level content the following year. And that educational plan needs to be documented and needs to be maintained, and it needs to ensure that it's being implemented. The main committee members for an ALC is a principal or a principal's designee. So that could be an associate principal, assistant principal, or a dean. but somebody who has kind of the ability to kind of leverage the resources or to point resources in the directions of kind of the instruction that's happening on this campus. The second committee member would be ensuring that the student's parent or guardian is included in that, so that they are aware of what are the needs of that student, as well as what are the supports that are going to be provided. And then the other committee members are really around the teacher. And so ensuring that if a student was not successful on a reading exam, that it needs to be a teacher who has the knowledge and the familiarity to the content to be able to help inform the development of that plan. And so it should be that student's teacher of record for that particular subject, or a teacher in that subject area that matches the content that was assessed. If it's happening in a transition year, it would be similar to kind of the transition admission review and dismissal meetings that are happening for students with disabilities. You want to ensure that you're creating that bridge of continuity. And so if it is a 5th grade student that's going to be at the middle school the next year, you want to ensure that there is a principal or designee of the receiving school, as well as a teacher of that same content area that's involved in that committee meeting, so that they're aware of what is the educational plan, and is that educational plan something that can be carried out the next school year. Accelerated learning requirements is the second aspect, or the second key requirement in House Bill 4545. And accelerated learning requirements is applicable to all, both the traditional school, K-12 school districts, as well as public charter schools. There is 2 ways that a district or a charter school can meet the accelerated instruction requirements for House Bill 4545. Option 1 is that they are assigning a student to a teacher who has the designation of a master exemplary or recognized on their kind of certification. This one is where I was talking about that there is flexibility for charter schools, because not all of their teachers are required to be certified. And so this one might be a little difficult for charter schools to also then have teachers that carry that level of designation. For traditional districts, they do have that option that they can meet the accelerated instruction requirements for a student by placing that student in that teacher's class for the next school year. The way that districts would go about doing that, or public charter schools that do have certification requirements, or that are bringing in teachers that have certifications, is that they would kind of either already participate in the teacher incentive allotment, to where they're actually creating their own local teacher designation system to get teachers that designation. They could be hiring teachers or kind of sponsoring teachers to receive that national board certification. So that would also kind of give that teacher that designation of recognized if they were to pass that certification exam. And the third option would be if you're pulling a teacher from a district that already previously had participated or was currently active in that teacher designation system. And so you're actually receiving a teacher, or you have hired a teacher that is already certified, or that also has that designation on this certificate. And if they already have that designation, that is listed on their teaching certification. Option 2, this is one that is really the path that most districts in our state are having to pursue. Is option 2 is they're having to implement supplemental instruction for that student on that particular campus. So for every assessment that a student was not successful on, they must receive at least a minimum of 30 hours of supplemental instruction, i.e. tutoring, in order for that student to be successful the following school year. And accelerated supplemental instruction is required for all students who took the state assessment. That means 3 through 8, all STAR assessed subject areas, as well as the end of course exam. So this is applicable to high school students. and that is 30 hours per content area. So if you have a student that was unsuccessful, if they took three tests, 3-star exams, and they were not able to pass or meet the satisfactory performance level for all 3, then that would be a cumulative of 90 hours of supplemental accelerated instruction. This is the language that I would say, you know, ensuring that you are familiar with what the requirements are. I hit the main one is that it must be for 30 hours. The other kind of key aspects around the requirements for supplemental instruction is ensuring that it's targeted instruction that includes supplemental materials. So ensuring that the instructional materials that are being used for tutoring are specific for supplemental instruction and for tutoring purposes. The other kind of key aspect, and it is one that we are kind of releasing a lot of guidance around, is that the size of the group is specifically in the law. So right now, the way that the law reads is that it must be provided individually or in groups of no more than 3 students. So the teacher to student ratio or tutor to student ratio can't be larger than 1 to 3. The way to kind of, if that isn't a possibility for the district could ask the parent to sign a consent and would basically allow that group to be larger, but every student in that group would need to have a signed consent form from their parent or guardian that basically says that supplemental accelerated instruction could be provided in a group larger than 3. When that tutoring can occur, and so there are some kind of parameters around when you can pull a student for this supplemental instruction. So it can be provided during the school day, it can be provided before school, after school, Saturdays, summer school. But that if it's being provided during the school day, it cannot be provided the student can't be pulled and provided this supplemental accelerated instruction during any time that their peers are providing something that is grade level appropriate. So if it can't be during the foundational curriculum time, so they can't be pulled from a core subject, it can't be during enrichment curriculum time, so they can't be pulled from an elective. So if a student is, you know, in band, or if a student is taking art or a CTE course, they can't be pulled from that course to meet the requirements of getting that tutoring support. And then the last kind of parameter is they can't be pulled from recess or physical education classes. So you might be thinking, what does that mean? When can they be pulled out? This is as you're determining what your master schedule is going to look like. You actually have the flexibility that many districts did not, and that is to build in the time. So having kind of some sort of like independent study class, or some sort of individualized learning time where some students would be receiving tutoring, some students would be receiving enrichment, or like kind of, I don't want to use enrichment because it means kind of more of the elective courses, but they could be kind of stretching for those that are kind of above grade level. So everybody's getting the individualized supports that they need. And the districts that had that already built into their schedules were able to implement House Bill 4545 during the day without significant master scheduling changes. This is a quick flow chart. It's basically will walk you through to identify, does a student need accelerated instruction? Yes or no? And then on the second question would be, does this student also need a accelerated learning committee? So quick flow chart as a resource for your use. And then in the appendix, I'm not going to spend time. I'm going to open it up to see if there's any questions, but in the appendix, what I put in here is basically how to leverage the tutoring support. There's various different ways that you can go about kind of getting support from the tutoring division at the agency. You know, there's supports around building your own kind of tutoring program, or the second approach is using our tutoring providers through our approved list or our fully subsidized list, meaning there's access to supplemental instruction licenses that, as well as kind of virtual tutors that can be contracted with to use those, that supplemental instructional materials that are kind of our ready-made, you know, tutoring that can be implemented on any campus. The guardrails there is that the fully subsidized providers, where we actually have the licenses that we can give out to schools, is limited to math and reading in grades K through 8. So right now we do not have paid support or paid for licenses and supports for anything outside of math and reading or for high school grades. So wanted to kind of, I included the links to the tutoring website as well as the accelerated instruction website and our FAQ that is kind of consistently being added to. And so there's a lot of great information there. And that's where you will see kind of any guidance around what aspects are a little bit flexible for charter schools. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'm going to look to see if there's any questions, or Duran, if you wanted to reach out with any questions.
There's a couple of quick questions. If you want to check the Q&A function, let me know if you need help there.
Yep. So grade, so Marina, that is right. So grade placement committees are no longer in statute. And so those do not need to be occurring, and that is no longer a requirement. So it was replaced with the accelerated learning committees, which are for grades 3, 5, and 8, and only for students who didn't pass math and reading. And that's the one that I stated that guidance will be coming out to see if those are applicable to charter schools. And then the second one is, our schools provided additional funding to provide the additional tutoring to students. So there was a grant application that was launched, which was the Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Support, or T-Class. That was open to, it was also open to, you know, all districts, charter schools, and even charter schools that were in preparation to be opening that had already been approved. And that did provide funding specifically for tutoring. Right now we have we do have a grant open that's specific for after school supports that does include the tutoring aspects. But other than those grant opportunities, the other opportunities is that they can use kind of the, you know, their standard consolidated funding, any kind of local funds, as well as, you know, you can use other funding streams to support accelerated instruction requirements.
You have a couple of more really quick questions, and then we're going to move into Brian's presentation, Lizette.
Yep. So the links that I shared in the appendix is the best way to get familiar with 4545. There are the recorded webinars. There's a very robust FAQ, and just a lot of supports on that link. And so for both tutoring and accelerated instruction. As far as future grant opportunities, you know, I think the charter team would let you all know as those come about. You know, I don't know what other grant opportunities are planned for next school year.
Yeah, and you guys would be planning and even opening in 2023. So, you know, as those opportunities come up, we worked really hard to make sure that the schools that were approved at SBOE this June had access to anything for the 21-22 school year. So it's something that we keep an eye out, and we make sure you guys have the opportunity to access any funds as necessary.
All right, thank you all so much for having me. If questions come up, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much for being here. And now, everyone, we are moving into our final presentation of the day. We have Brian Doran here with us. Brian, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at the agency before you go into your presentation?
Sure, thanks, Duran. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Doran. I'm the Director of Expanded Learning Models here at TEA. So really, my team is thinking about anything extra time and how to make the most impactful use of that time, particularly from an instructional standpoint. And so today I'll be talking through a program called Additional Day School Year. But in general, my team works with things like after school that was mentioning, summer programming, a more comprehensive redesign component that we'll talk through, and things like that. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, so additional days school year. I always like to start with just a quick grounding that I'm sure folks on this call are very familiar with summer slide, but it's always helpful to ground in the idea of summer slide and the true barrier of what we're facing. And so summer slide is really where we see student achievement levels drop, particularly for low-income students over the course of summer due to a lack of academic opportunities. And this is particularly true for low-income students and can lead to a gap of up to 3 grade levels just by the time those students are in 5th grade. And so that's a cumulative effect. And then certainly, of course, with COVID over the past couple of years, this has been magnified. So we are experiencing a need for learning acceleration for students across the board, and the potential for future summers to disrupt any learning acceleration that we are experiencing is real. And so what we have is, fortunately, from the last legislative session in 2019, the legislature added what we call additional days school year, or affectionately internally we call it ADSEE. So ADSEE provides half-day formula funding for any school system that wants to add instructional days. And this is beyond a minimum of 180 days and up to 210 total. And this is specific to any of your elementary campuses, or really more specifically, any grade level within the pre-K through 5 grade band. So a couple things to call out on this slide. There is a requirement for a minimum of 180 instructional days within each participating campus's regular academic calendar. And this is a bit different than how campuses report their instructional time otherwise, which is done from a 75,600 minute requirement. So a little bit different construct of thinking through the academic calendar from a days perspective instead of the minutes perspective. But a great opportunity for adding those 30 days or half-day funding for up to 30 additional days. More specifics on the actual eligibility for ADSEE. So these are the main components to think through as you're looking at adding instructional time through ADSEE. First, as we already talked about, serve at least 1 grade level within grades pre-K through 5. This is at the campus level, so each participating campus will need to have at least 180 instructional days. So if you're a charter organization that has multiple campuses, but you only want one campus to be implementing an ADSEE calendar, only that campus would need to be at 180 instructional days. The calendar must also have 75,600 operational minutes. That's the same requirement across the board for any campus. And then you must be willing to add up to 30 additional half days of instruction to the 180 instructional days in the campus's academic calendar. For those half days of instruction, the minimum requirement is 2 hours of instruction, and that aligns with the student attendance accounting handbook that we have internally, where a half day is anywhere from 2 to 4 hours of instruction. So that minimum requirement to receive ADSEE funding for that day is 2 hours. And then finally, those ADSEE days must be held on distinct calendar days, separate from the regular instruction. So if you have an early release on one of your regular instructional days, you are not able to add ADSEE onto the second half of that day to kind of double up on funding there. And these are, let's see, there we go, okay. Animation's a little bit off there, sorry. We think through ADSEE internally as 3 options. And so they're on the screen right now. The first is voluntary summer learning. This is the most popular option, the one that we see most commonly implemented. And this is called voluntary summer learning, really for summer enrichment and summer additional pieces there. So you're looking at a 180-day traditional calendar and then up to 30 days for something else. Option 2, we do have a number of districts and charters across the state looking at intersessional calendars. And so this would, same concept as summer learning, where you likely have a targeted student population attending intersessions throughout the course of the year. This allows you for a more real-time targeted remediation or learning acceleration with that subset of students. So a great opportunity for just-in-time supports. And then option 3 is a more comprehensive full year redesign. And we have a number of districts across the state that are looking at this. particularly through the ADSEE Planning and Execution Grant Program. But this is basically increasing your academic calendar to 210 days. And then with every single day, you're looking at adjusting the master schedule of that calendar of that day to slightly reduce the amount of daily instruction to make way for student brain breaks and teacher planning time. So make it a much more sustainable day for both students and teachers. Then since you are implementing a 210-day calendar, you can stretch those academics out over the course of 210 days. So you're not actually missing any of that instructional time over the course of the calendar. So 3 options here. We also see a mix of both summer learning and intersessionals being implemented across the state, and encourage people to think about what makes most sense for them. That's really the gist of additional day school year, these 3 options, and it's remarkably simple to access the funding, meaning all you really have to do is make sure that you meet all of the eligibility requirements on this slide. And then at the end of the school year, you report your attendance during ADSEE days in the last data submission and the last PM submission for the school year. And then you will receive that funding in the settle up process, in the funding settle up process. And then I have a table of resources here on the screen right now. So if certainly encourage folks to look at the ADSEE website. That's dea.texas.gov/ADSEE. And then a number of different examples or components that might help think through what this could potentially look like if you're interested in pursuing it, including different calendar examples for each option. This summer budgeting guidance is a great document to think through different funding opportunities to help fund a summer program. The summer learning work plan is a more comprehensive kind of planning process over the course of the entire year, knowing that summer takes a lot of work to do well. And then finally, there's a 22-23 master calendar template, which could be helpful to take a look at, although I believe most of you all, or this group, would be starting in 23-24. So either way, it could help kind of think through what a calendar could look like if that's helpful. But that's ADSEE in a nutshell. There are a number of appendix slides, and if you have any additional questions, the ADSEE webpage on TEA's website is there, and then also we have an ADSEE inbox, ADSY, at tea.texas.gov, and we're happy to help troubleshoot or think through implementation options or do whatever might help you all in this process.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it very much. We do have a few questions if you'd like to help us answer those. The Definitely. First question, it's kind of a 2-part. First, I'll go with the part that refers to you and your expertise. Is there anything available for secondary?
Not within ADSEE itself, unfortunately. It's just pre-K through 5 at this point.
Thank you. And then the second part of that is this funding included in the financial template for the application? It is not included in the financial plan workbook. And then you have a couple of other questions. Brian, do you see those, or do you want me to read them to you?
I do. Okay. Yeah, so Marina, Duran just answered that as well. That's correct. It is not currently in that financial workbook. So you'd want to factor that in separately.
Thank you.
There are, I believe they are named on the ADSEE websites. They certainly had been. Sorry, the question being, there are a number of districts that are trying different ADSEE designs. Are they named on the ADSEE website? There are several, I believe there are several on there. And there are also those 3 examples that I gave within the deck. So Duran, I think, depending on how you all are doing this, we can share the slides afterwards as well, yes, with links to those things.
We are sharing the presentations and the recording from today as well on our webpage. So thank you for that. You have a few more minutes with Brian and Lizette and everyone else if y'all want to add your questions to the question and answer function. And if everybody wants to come back on screen for goodbyes?
I think the other piece, kind of the link to Lizette's comments here around 4545 is, it's a little bit nuanced, but ADSEE is one of those funding streams that could help you help support funding for tutoring through 4545. The nuance is ADSEE itself is non-compulsory for students. So you need to be careful that you're not requiring students to attend those ADSEE days. But if instruction is being provided that meets the 4545 requirements, there is a potential overlap there.
Brian, there's another question for you. Let's see. Are you allowed to estimate ADSEE and other revenues for the template? I don't believe so, but we can get back to you with that. Well, I see no more questions coming in. Really appreciate all of you today joining us, and Brian and Lizette for presenting today. We are very grateful, as are our applicants, that you shared your knowledge and expertise. Your presentations, as I said, will be posted on our webpage. And unless anyone has anything else to add, we will see you next week for our third support seminar. And Natalie, isn't that one going to be focusing on special education?
Yes, it'll be focusing on special populations, but primarily special education. So, you know, put the word out there with your applicant teams. If you have questions coming up about that, it should be more in-depth information.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We are going to give you a couple of minutes of your afternoon back and hope you have a good evening as well. Bye.